As the latest offensive in GW's endless war against everyone who bought a Space Marine model before the Primaris models existed, today is the spoiler day for the new Space Marine Codex that is releasing next week on October 10th. So let's dive in and talk about the changes made to our power-armored overlords. What's up, folks? Welcome back to Tactical Tortoise. My name is Trevi, and today we're going to be talking about some new Space Marine rules. A big summary of changes and new rules that are in the new Codex is available thanks to our friends over at Goonhammer. I'll put a link to that article in the description, and plenty of places and other YouTube channels have gone over the entire new book in great detail. So rather than talking ad nauseum about every little single thing that's different in the new Codex, I've picked out a couple of the wildest and wackiest changes that the hyper-competent chads over at the GW R&D department have foisted upon the 40k metagame. I even have some Tyranids tearing up a Deathwatch army to play in the background to symbolize the dismantling of the old Space Marine paradigm to make way for a brand new and shiny future, and because it's the only game versus Space Marines that I have recorded on my hard drive that I haven't used yet. So with that, let's get into the coolest and craziest rules in the new Space Marine Codex. The changes are in no particular order, but I will be starting with changes that I think are either good or very cool, and then maybe moving on to some stinkers later on. Hello, it's Trevi from the future, and I'm interjecting into this video to apologize for the scratchiness of the audio. It was very chilly, and I recorded it with a hood on. What I didn't realize is that that would create a little bit of a scratchy noise sometimes in the background. I hope it's not too bad, and I hope that you can struggle through it. If you can't, I totally understand. You can just leave a dislike on the video, maybe comment below on about how much it makes you want to tear your own ears off. It was very cozy when I was recording it though, so that was nice. Let's get back to it. First off, we have some nerfs to the chapter tactics that basically every Space Marine army ever took in the 8th edition version of the Codex. Long-range marksman has been changed to not buff flame weapons or assault weapons. I think that's great. We're only going to be looking at rapid fire and heavy weapons, getting plus 3 inches of range from that. Thank goodness. It was weird to get 21-inch pistols like up in your face. It didn't really make a lot of sense. Master Artisans has been absolutely dumpstered, allowing you to reroll 1 hit roll every time you shoot with a unit. Now that auras are changing, as we've talked about in the past a lot, that's actually probably still going to be playable, but it'll be interesting to see if people still pick up on it. Salamanders lost their version of Master Artisans and moved it to just rerolling 1 wound roll, which is way more relevant, I think, than rerolling a single hit roll. And probably we'll still see Salamanders doing some work, especially with how good Meltas and Flamers are in this new Codex. The new chapter commands mechanics are really interesting. They now cost points instead of CP, and I think the most interesting question for Space Marine players here is that they'll have to look deep inside themselves and decide whether points or CP are more valuable to their army. With more CP on the table in 9th edition now, a lot of the chapter command and pre-game stratagems felt pretty easy to spend for Space Marines. Like, they could spend down to 4 or 5 command points before the game started, and then regenerate themselves back up to spending a total of somewhere around 12, and not really feel the pinch very much. Now, they always get all their command points because they won't really be spending as many pre-game points on upgrading their characters, but their characters will be slightly more expensive. Out of a 2,000 point list, that cost doesn't seem too great. In smaller formats, we are playing a ton of Combat Patrol over on the Discord server right now. You can join us in the link description. Get on in there. We're playing 500 points all day, and certainly I don't think anybody's going to be upgrading their captain to a chapter master in a 500 point format. But that does mean that Space Marines will generally start with more CP, which is really good for them. So who knows whether or not a lot of these chapter command upgrades are still going to be worth it. Fortunately, for their power level, I think a lot of them are busted, so let's talk about those. The Chief Librarian upgrade in and of itself doesn't really do that much. It lets you deny an additional power, although nobody's taking Psychers right now, so that doesn't really matter. If you're a Space Marine player, you probably aren't taking Librarian, so you can afford the Witch. Who knows if this will change that, but it does give you an additional deny, and it unlocks some pretty good Relic and Warlord traits. First of all, Psychic Mastery lets you get +1 to cast. That's sick. That's super good, and especially for some of the chapter-specific disciplines, which are typically pretty good. Given in some serious side-eye to Salamanders right here with their like +billion toughness, -1 to hit. Having +1 to cast that would be pretty nice. That is a Warlord trait, so potentially if the Promethean Tome is also still available for Salamanders, you could stack those two. That's gross, but if you don't, you could also just take this Neural Shroud, which increases your Psychic Hood which is a -1 to cast aura, to 24 inches, meaning that you're basically always +1 to deny. He's just a Grey Knight now. That's pretty sick. Chapter Masters obviously took an enormous nerf. Now that their ability is not an aura, you have to pick a core unit or a character within 6 inches of them to be affected by the rerolls, rather than just affecting everything, including vehicles or whatever. I'll also touch on core a little bit later in the video, but obviously this ability isn't quite as good. Just like the Chief Librarian, though, the things that come along with it are pretty good. First off, the Chapter Master basically becomes not a captain and isn't affected by the new restriction on the number of Space Marine captains you can take, which means you can take a Chapter Master next to a regular captain. So if you wanted your Smash captain still in your single battalion list, you could just take a Chapter Master, then you also get the captain alongside him. It picks a unit in your command phase, and then they just get affected by the rerolls for the entire turn. So if you rocket a dude out, the Chapter Master can be buffing them one at a time. It works a lot like the Chronomancer that we saw previewed for the Necron Codex. Also, I should note as well that it's probably unlikely that a lot of the Forge World datasheets change. If you still want access to those aura abilities, you can still potentially get them if you're willing to play into a successor chapter, at least until the Imperial Armor revision book comes out, and who knows when that will be, because Games Workshop hasn't told anybody. The other thing that you get is access to this Master of the Codex Warlord trait, which just every turn just gives you a CP on a 4+. So should give you 2 to 3 CP over the course of the game, and if it only costs 1 CP to hero of the chapter that guy into a Master of the Codex, boom, you're netting positive, nailing it. The Chapter Master specific relic is also sick. It gives you a 2+ save and +1 toughness and wounds. Basically gives everyone access potentially to an unkillable Smash captain, just like Salamanders have had this whole time. Obviously, if you're on a bike, you started at a base 6 wounds. Upgrading that guy, he goes to 7. That's a really big swing, since a lot of multi-damage weapons, that adds an entire step to the amount of damage that they have to do to kill you. Damage 2 obviously goes from having to hit you 3 times to having to get 4 wounds through. Damage 3 goes from 2 to 3, and those are 2 of the most common damage profiles, especially now that Power Fists are going to flat 2 damage, that you'll see. So getting +1 to wound, or +1 wound on your profile, is a big frickin' deal. That also brings that guy to toughness 6 base, which is also a pretty good cutoff. And if you're able to combo it with any of the existing Warlord traits and relics, there's a Warlord trait, at least in the current Space Marine Codex, and I honestly don't know if it's in this one, I assume it is, that gives you +1 wound and a 6+ ignore. You can get that guy to 8 wounds with a 6+ ignore, probably coming in at 9 wounds. If you have the ability to double up Warlord traits on top of that, you could probably make him even tougher to kill. Obviously, there's no stratagem to do that in the core Space Marine book. As far as I can see, obviously, I don't have the book in front of me right now, so a lot of the stuff is me talking out my butt. If you have an exemplar of the chapter style stratagem, you could potentially stack that even farther. That's super cool. Obviously, it costs you 40 points to do, so you might not want to do it, but I think if you want one of those late game pieces, and especially if you're looking at those smaller point levels, having a character like this could be super sick. The Chief Apothecary is also getting a little bit of attention. Apparently, the Apothecary datasheet just has the 6-inch aura for a 6+ damage ignore built into it. Like, you don't have to take Father of the Future to do that. So, honestly, the Chief Apothecary upgrade might actually just not be relevant at all. The Apothecary can already heal, and he can already give out the 6+ ignore, which is probably what you're taking him for anyway. So you don't need to upgrade him to do that. He just does it all the time. But if you want to make him the Chief Apothecary, he can heal 2 different things. Their healing ability now doesn't bring any models back unless you take this Selfless Healer Warlord trait to allow you to revive a model for free. It's a stratagem to revive a model, and if you take the Warlord trait, you just do it for freezies. Apparently, the stratagem now brings them back at full wounds, though, so what people are very excited about is bringing back ATVs. So that's pretty dumb. Let's move on. Beyond talking about the chapter command, everybody's bored of that already. Let's talk about some other random stuff. The new Judiciary datasheet has Temporal Mortis being crazy. Now, it just makes a unit entirely ineligible to be chosen to attack until the end of the fight phase, which is gross because it absolutely nukes Counter Assault, the core rulebook stratagem for you to fight after another charging unit fought. Previously, if you had any fight last abilities, you could just Counter Assault to get through them, assuming it was your opponent's turn and they were charging you. Now, just get straight out of here. The Temporal Mortis says that you're about to die, and so you will. You will be killed by the Space Marines before you get to swing. Although apparently the range of the ability has gone down to 3 inches instead of 6. You know what else is pretty good? Not having to spend any CP on Duty Eternal. Dreadnoughts are Just always have Duty Eternal all the time. Small mercies, I guess, is that this change probably hasn't applied to Forge World datasheet, so I don't think our Relic Contemptor's friends are going to be -1 damage, at least for now. Maybe when their datasheet gets updated in nobody knows. In addition to getting your chapter command upgrades for points instead of CP, these Space Marine players are going to be drowning in CP. They're not going to know what to do with it. Another unit datasheet that changed it a little bit is the Eliminators, who, if they take their little Carbine guy, who in 8th edition or in the 8th edition Codex made you fall back after shooting Overwatch, which was like a really cool mechanic and almost never useful. Sometimes, if you were playing in a meta that was really heavy in deep striking aggressor units, things like Genestealer Cult that would pop in a bunch of acolytes and then charge you, you could use that unit to act as a front line. They could screen out the rest of your army when those guys would pop up 9 inches away, then charge you, you would move 6 inches back, they would fail their charge, and then you would laugh at them and maybe slap them lightly on the cheek. That said, people pretty quickly found out that you could just use the Auspex scan stratagem, just kill that unit, instead of making fun of your opponent for forgetting that you could fall back after shooting. So nobody ever actually took that guy. It was just a really cool mechanic. Now what he does is the unit just moves after shooting that Carbine. That's sick. Eliminators don't innately ignore line of sight now, so they do have to do a little bit of maneuvering to actually get their line of sight. So you could use this guy to potentially move the unit even farther. They could move 6 inches up, shoot somebody random with your gun. Maybe you kill a guardsman or something, and then they move 6 more inches. It's like a free 6-inch advance, but you also killed a guardsman. That's pretty cool. Or, obviously, you can use it to move in and out of buildings and shoot. Obviously, everyone knows how powerful hit and run abilities are, especially in 40k. Although, you do have to give up probably the +1 to hit and wound from the unit leader looking at somebody with his binoculars, and you have to give up one of your sniper rifles. I don't know how good that is, but it is very cool, and I'm here to talk about cool stuff. You know what else is cool is litanies being super duper good. Already, everyone basically took all of the librarians out of their list because they're expensive and they deny you from taking Abhor the Witch, and they replaced them with even more chaplains, and now just do that more. First off, litanies cast in your command phase, which in some circumstances, some very specific circumstances, is not as good, because if you have any defensive litanies, like Litany of Faith to give you a 5+ ignore against mortal wounds, you won't be able to do that before your opponent's turn. Oh well, I don't know, just hide away from the mortal wounds. There's not that many of them. I think you'll be okay. The big deal is that it doesn't give your opponent the ability to snipe out the unit that you have upgraded with that litany before it gets to activate. That was a big deal if you were going second in 8th edition or using the 8th edition Codex. You would put your Catechism of Fire on a unit, you would pat them on the shoulder and tell them to go blow up a tank with their bolt rifles or something, and then your opponent would be scared of that. They would hear you saying that to your intercessors, and they would shoot them, and they would all die, and nobody would get your Catechism of Fire. It doesn't feel like such a big change, to be honest, but as somebody who has played a whole bunch of chaplains and who many times has lost the unit that I put a very important chaplain buff on, I can't tell you like just how happy that makes me feel for the times that I play Space Marines, but when I play against Space Marines, I'll be sad. Also, Exhortation of Rage has become a 6-inch aura that gives you +1 to wound in melee. What? Come on, man. Chaplains are so good now. I mean, they were already like the best HQ in the Codex. Now they're just even better than that. There's also some really cool mechanics that they're bringing into these books. I think the first one are the categories of stratagems, excuse me. This isn't even really a mechanical change. They've just keyworded a lot of stratagems to sort of frame them in different ways. And the most interesting one to me are war gear stratagems. These are stratagems that are only usable on units who have a keyword that specifies that they carry that type of war gear. So for example, an Auspex. If you carry an Auspex, you can use Auspex scan. That makes a lot of sense, and that's basically how the stratagems have been defined all the way through 8th edition. I love that these stratagems are a throwback to the way old abilities back in 2nd and 3rd edition, where you would be able to upgrade your units with these bizarre, esoteric upgrades that didn't do anything. And they were like just a points bleed on your army, but you would have to like represent them on your units, and people will get mad if you had your guy holding an Auspex, but you didn't pay the point to give him an Auspex. I think it's kind of nice. Otherwise, in this category, there are some other interesting stratagems to talk about, like, for example, the Terror Troop stratagem that Reavers can use, which screws with your opponent's actions. That's super cool. I'm so excited that the action mechanic is getting a little bit more interaction with other stuff. So Reavers now can prevent you from performing actions while you're near them, and if you're performing an action and a Reaver gets close to you, they can shut it down. That's super cool. Most actions probably you'll not be trying to perform if they take a full round because those secondary objectives are just bad, but I like the idea that that tool is in your toolbox, and that's something that you can potentially use if your opponent, for whatever reason, both decides to take repair teleport homers and is within like 3 inches of your Reavers, and also you've taken Reavers. That's a very specific set of circumstances, but man, when it happens, you're going to slam that stratagem down on the table, you're going to give your opponent a giant middle finger, and you're going to feel real good about yourself. I also like that there's going to be Codex-specific secondary objectives. There was some question in the preview of whether or not these would actually be legal for matched play, and especially for GT play. That is a great question. They mostly seem bad, but I am afraid that maybe if we get them specifically in supplements or something like that, there will be some ones that are not bad, and they will totally break the faction in question. I think this will have to be handled with a deft hand from the competitive community. Probably much defter hand than Games Workshop themselves have given it, but I do like the integration of secondary objectives into codexes. I think that's a very cool thing, and potentially a very flavorful thing, but probably one that Games Workshop will screw up somehow. Talking about some specific units, Eradicators can now be taken in units of 6. They probably won't be, I don't know, actually, maybe you just want to play Salamanders and take 18 Eradicators. That sounds pretty good. It's 36 Melta shots, a +1 to wound. Potentially more if you've got some multi-Meltas in there. Gross. Already Eradicators, especially now that they can take a multi-Melta, probably kill basically any vehicle in the game, even at units of 3. So taking them in units of 6 is just complete overkill. And if you split their fire at all, they don't get their total obliteration ability, which now they also don't get while advancing. So there's even less of a reason not to take that multi-Melta if the price is right. I don't know how much it's going to cost. So taking them in those big units is probably bad, but the fact that you can do it is endlessly hilarious to me. The Hunter and Stalker got an enormous buff. They now don't get any penalties for shooting at things that don't fly, and instead of getting a bonus when they shoot at things that fly, they get a bonus when they shoot aircraft, which I think makes a lot more sense, and the bonus is enormous. So if these tanks stay around the same points cost that they were in 8th edition, do Stalkers like totally slap now? They were super efficient autocannons before, and now they just get a bunch of extra attacks and bonuses to hit if they shoot aircraft, and no penalties if they don't. So it's just like a toughness 8 idiot with a whole bunch of guns on it. That seems really sick. I'll have to look at what their points cost is when I actually get access to that. Also, Tremor Shells has been fixed. People who've been watching this channel for a little while, and people who have read the FAQ section over on their Discord, know that I have a little problem with the Tremor Shell stratagem, and also the Seismic Bomb stratagem that Adeptus Mechanicus have, which is literally a copy and paste of Tremor Shells. Tremor Shells somehow survived multiple FAQs without a change, and had rules that literally didn't work. It affected your charge rolls, but only during your movement phase. So if you charged during your movement phase, that would be bad for you. But otherwise, you're good to go. No worries about that. The stratagem has been rewritten in the 9th edition Codex just in time for it absolutely not to matter, because Thunderfire cannons are absolutely effing garbage now. Strength 4, 0 AP, not a core unit, so can't benefit from rerolls. If I ever wanted to stack 4 bolt guns and made them shoot indirectly, that's what I would do, but I don't think that's what anybody's asking for. Nobody wants to shoot a Stormbolter over a building. But on the other hand, the Rapier Carrier stock just went up. So those two guys who are pulling the Rapier Carrier around, they are having the time of their lives. Talking about broken stratagems again, we're going back to stratagems. You know what is a really good stratagem is Endless Cacophony. That's a pretty good one. It lets you stack a bunch of buffs on a unit and then shoot it twice. Fortunately, it's only Chaos for Chaos Space Marines now. Or is it? Because the rapid fire stratagem went from doubling the number of attacks you made with your specifically bolt rifles to just letting you double tap your intercessors, which is way frickin' better. Obviously, there's a bunch of reasons for that. The most obvious one being that you can shoot it with other weapons that aren't just bolt rifles, which were not the most efficient weapon once auto bolt rifles got a giant points decrease. Although it ended up netting a ton of damage with the rapid fire strat. You'd shoot 40 times with that unit, assuming they stood still or used the stratagem to stand still. And -1 AP, probably -2. You get a bunch of buffs to wound on them. And you just blast somebody right off the table. Now, you can just do that, but it's more efficient. So, because you don't have to calculate your split fires before you do it. You just get to shoot at one thing, see how it goes, and then retarget all your stuff at the end. Shooting 2 times is way better than shooting 1 time. That's absolutely sick. Also, you can just do it with auto bolt rifles, so you don't have to actually take bolt rifles to do it. That's a really good stratagem, and we might see 10-man Intercessor units now, maybe to replace those terrible aggressors that just got nerfed into the absolute dirt. Power of the Machine Spirit just lets you operate a vehicle on top profile. That's pretty cool. Unfortunately, as I'm going to talk about in about 1 minute, nobody's going to take vehicles anymore, so who cares? Also, touching on warlord traits real quick, the Rights of War warlord trait gives any core unit objective secured. Because, you know, why wouldn't it? Why not? Previously, you had to jump through some hoops to do that, but it sounds like this is just a core Space Marine warlord trait. So you can anybody can make their Blade God veterans objective secured. So now, with all of the mirth and excitement out of the way, I'm going to talk about some poopier changes to the new Space Marine Codex in 9th edition Warhammer 40k. The first one being core, like I just talked about. The core keyword seems totally mishandled. Basically, according to the previews, everything but Centurions and vehicles that aren't dreadnoughts got core. So instead of having vehicles and I guess ATVs for some reason, the ATVs, they're not core. They can't have it, which is good because they seem really, really strong. There's basically no nuance to the core keyword. This is sort of what I was a little bit worried about with the keyword. I think it's good that they have a lever that they can pull to balance some of their aura abilities and their targeted bonuses, but it does feel a little bit sad. That's just another thing that you can write on their data sheet that people have to keep track of. Also, it doesn't affect any vehicles besides dreadnoughts, like any of them at all. Like basically nothing has core that is a vehicle that does not walk around on 2 legs. And that feels like such a miss. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but it would have been interesting if you maybe have a warlord trait that like makes repulsors core or something like that. That'd be cool. That'd be really cool. But Games Workshop, especially with Space Marines, I guess their catalog is so just phenomenally oversized that they have to be very formulaic with how they add rules. And we saw this during the Munitorum Field Manual. They just copy and pasted a formula to every points value in the game. This feels kind of like this is the same thing they're doing with this new core mechanic. So we'll see how it goes. They'll probably get better as new codexes go along. It's just too bad that Space Marines sort of got the brunt of it. Actually, no, it's not. Screw Space Marines. Whatever. You guys don't get cool auras and stuff. That was some serious talk, so let's talk about some even more serious changes that I think are going to ruin the Codex. The next one being that Temporal Corridor stops you from fighting in the fight phase. What the F, GW? Temporal Corridor is the coolest psychic power basically ever. I like any double move psychic powers. They give you a lot of really interesting things that you can do. You can cast psychic powers, and then you can move yourself. You can double move yourself into melee. Space Marine infantry tend to be really slow, and it already has a targeting requirement. They have to cast it on Phobos infantry, which already kind of suck. So I thought it was cool that in some situations you could get yourself to advance and charge. You could Temporal Corridor to move yourself twice with 2 advances, and then you could get into melee at a really long threat range without even having to put a jump pack on. That's pretty cool, but not anymore. Although for some reason you can still charge, you just can't fight. That's dumb. I can't. Why? I mean, sure, whatever. Who cares? But I liked the ability for that unit to go and stab people. It wasn't even that good, to be honest. It was okay in White Scars, but it's a 7 to cast. You got to upgrade that guy to a Chief Librarian thing to get +1 to cast, to even hope to get it off. Otherwise, it's just a coin flip every time you want to get your cool double move combo going. But you just can't do it anymore. You just can't fight when you get there. That's dumb. That makes me very mad. Oh, God. There's a big black hole in the Codex right now as well for non-Codex compliant chapters. There's a big list of units that they can't take, but who knows what the rules are for their replacements for those units. So, for example, Space Wolves cannot take Devastator Squads. Instead, they have Longfang Squads, but what does the data sheet for Longfang Squad look like? Is it a core unit? Who knows? Do any of the stratagems work on it? I don't know. Whatever. So, at least until a giant FAQ comes out, which I'm sure sucks for some intern to have to draft up, or until we get supplements for those chapters, who knows what's going to happen there. I'm sure there's a plan in place, but at least for the next couple of months until everyone gets their supplement, there's going to be some problems, I think, in this new Codex. And and we're just going to have to deal with it. Next up, the Haywire Mind model that comes in cursors. Games Workshop finally realized that that mechanic wasn't actually that good, and nobody actually took the Haywire Mind. So Games Workshop has instead made that an ability to deal damage to charging models. So the Haywire Mind model itself has it just doesn't have any use. It's just a random thing that someone in 3 years' time, some new player is going to get their box of incursors and ask what the F this little dumb robot thing is, and someone will have to explain to them, back in my day, you could do a weird action after you moved and put this on an objective, and it would deal mortal wounds to somebody, and nobody used it. It sounds like to me that the Repulsor Executioner can't double tap its main gun. The Aquilon Optics that used to let it do that, it gave it basically the Lehman Russ grinding advance rule, where if you moved lower than half of your movement, you could shoot your big cannon twice. That just gives you +1 to hit with your big cannon. Turns out, fun fact, +1 to hit is not as good as shooting 2 strength 10, D6 min 3 damage, AP 5 gunshots every turn. It's not quite the same thing. So Executioners might be flat garbage now, everyone. That's sad. RIP Executioners. Honor the Chapter only works on Assault Intercessors now, so RIP double fighting with a Marine unit ever. That sucks. I don't know how often you're going to see Assault Intercessors in melee where they actually want to swing again and they aren't all dead. That's just kind of sad. I hope that doesn't go the same way for other factions. I mean, I play Tyranids, we got a double fight. Please don't take that away and make it like Hormagaunts only for 3 CP, because that would be sad. Transhuman Physiology in the first gunshot of the war against Firstborn Space Marines has gone to being Primaris only. Also, it gets a points break if you're less than 5 models. So if you use it on a character, it's only 1 CP. So prepare to be transhumanly physiologied against in every phase of every game that you ever play ever. That's disgusting and gross, and I hate it. Speaking of the war against Firstborn Space Marines, oh boy, are they... do they mostly suck? Okay, apparently, Tactical Marines are 18 points a model and relegated to your shelf. Wow, that's a lot of points for 1 wound in a meta that is full of 2 damage guns. Things like heavy bolters now that will just kill them anyway. Doesn't even matter if they have 1 or 2 wounds. That's so many, like, sometimes you would take a Tactical Marine squad because they were cheaper than an Intercessor squad, and you didn't need them to be up and fighting people and get that extra attack and stuff. Like, they just needed to sit on objective and not die to a single Thunderfire cannon. And they cost the same, basically the same as an Intercessor squad, and have a worse gun and worse melee profile. What the heck, man? You will never see Tactical Marines again. Get them out of here. Apparently, scouts are also elites now, so you can't use them as cheap troop fillers. I'm not actually as worried about this. If scouts are still super cheap and forward deploying is like so important, especially in an alternating deployment format where you can use it to block off where your opponent's forward deploying stuff can go. It's still not bad. It's not good. They're not OBSEC anymore unless you take that Warlord trait, and you can't use them to fill out your troops allotment very quickly and then spend the rest of your points on Blade Guard veterans or whatever, but people weren't doing that anyway. Intercessors are so efficient that they just sort of pushed everything else out of the meta, and you saw scouts every once in a while, and honestly, you still might. I don't know. It seems fine. The biggest downside is in smaller points games, you're sort of playing Combat Patrol. You can join our Combat Patrol games down in the link in the Discord. We play tons of Combat Patrol now. It's basically taken over my entire life, and I see nothing but a 30 by 44 inch table when I close my eyes to fall asleep at night. But sometimes you would end up taking a scout squad because all you want is some guys to maybe block off a move or to sit on an objective somewhere, and you don't want to spend 100 points on an Intercessor squad, but man, now you like don't have a choice. You're just gonna be buying that Intercessor squad. It was also funny how throwaway scouts were. Like, scouts are supposed to be the future of the Space Marine chapter. They're the neophytes, unless you play Space Wolves, and then they're the old veterans who are supposed to know what they're doing, and you would always just throw them into your opponent's army and have them die. Like, how do you ever get any more Space Marines? No scouts ever survived a game of 40k. But now they will survive by not seeing the table. Lastly, I have one more rule I want to talk about, and this is a really important one because I think it's hilarious, and that is that the heavy Intercessor datasheet is just wrong. It just has the wrong words in it. And as as we saw in the preview, they've given the Heavy Intercessor their own versions of all of the Intercessor's guns. They have the Executor bolt rifle instead of a Stalker bolt rifle. They have the Hellstorm bolt rifle instead of the auto bolt rifle. And on the data sheet, they just replaced that with a Heavy Intercessor's Stalker bolt rifle in the War Gear options section. That was, I guess, at one point the name of the gun. And then someone over at the creative department was like, well, I don't know if Heavy Intercessor Stalker Bolt Rifle is really the name we should go with. But like maybe they had beef with someone in the editing department, and the person in the editing department was like, it will always be a Heavy Intercessor Stalker Bolt Rifle to me, and just refused to change it in the War Gear options. Mechanically, this means that the Heavy Intercessor actually, in fact, cannot swap their war gear for any of the war gear that is listed in their profile, because it requires a Heavy Intercessor to swap into a Heavy Auto Bolt Rifle, a Heavy Stalker Bolt Rifle, and those don't exist. You have Executors and Hellstorms, and there's no profile for those weapons. So I guess you could put it on the model. It just doesn't do anything. That'll get FAQ day one, or maybe it won't, and that'll be funnier. But it is hilarious that it made it through. So, in conclusion, if everyone is very excited to spend $50 for a book with data sheets that literally don't work, you can go on over to gamesworkshop.com and pre-order your copy of the Codex Space Marines 9th edition today, and you'll be able to get that. Maybe someday we'll know what the profile of the Heavy Intercessor Heavy Auto Bolt Rifle is. Until then, it's a mystery. That's how Games Workshop gets us. They're like the J.J. Abrams of miniature gaming companies. It's all a mystery box, and that's why they keep us coming back. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll be doing a rundown of some Necron stuff later on this week. I think we got a lot of new rules to talk about, and I am psyched to make videos on it. I hope everyone enjoyed the fun rules that I thought were silly in the 9th edition Space Marine Codex. I also hope that everyone takes the opportunity to like and subscribe to like the video. Don't subscribe to the video, subscribe to the channel. Also, head on over to patreon.com/tacticaltortoise. You can get some sweet gubbins over there. Everybody loves gubbins, and you can get that. And also, all the people that you see on the screen right now, they're also getting gubbins in exchange for being a patron. And those people are just the greatest kind of people. You know, they're just the best, and I love each and every one of them. Especially the people at the bottom, I love them the most. And if you want to be loved by me the most, you also can join at patreon.com/tacticaltortoise. And with that plug out of the way, that is going to wrap up the video, everyone. Thanks again for watching. I recorded way too long, and this is going to take forever for me to edit out all the garbage that I put in. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.